everyone? My name is Jamon McKinney, or you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Welcome everyone to the Juice Alert. If you have not subscribed to the Juice Alert already, be sure to do that right about now. You will not regret it. You can find me, of course, on YouTube as well as podcasting platforms. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that great stuff. If you want to follow me on social media, you can do that as well. Links to all my social media accounts are in the description of this episode. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button right about now. Definitely helps me out. Also, if you're listening on podcasting platforms, consider leaving me a good rating and review. It definitely helps me out right here. I have a special guest with me. He's a good friend from my college. I go to the University of Toledo, so he goes to the University of Toledo as well. His name is Caleb Gill. He's a New York Jets fan. We're going to be talking about everything New York Jets football today. So, Caleb, thank you for joining the show. How you doing today, man?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show or podcast. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We've done this before over the phone, and that last time was fun. And I'm really looking forward to this. I'm doing pretty well, just getting settled into school. But besides that, we're doing pretty well.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously, I had Caleb on the show. Actually, in the off season, when I was doing my predictions for the 2020 NFL season, that was very fun. So I'm happy to have you on the show once again. Definitely want to get to a lot of things. Towards the end of the show, we will talk about the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills, the outlook of the whole AFC East. Buffalo obviously made a big time run. Was very close to getting to the Super Bowl. So we'll talk about Josh Allen and that team. We'll talk about should the Patriots maybe move on from Cam Newton. We'll talk about Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins. Should the Dolphins maybe move on from Tua? We'll talk about that. But, Caleb, you're obviously a Jets fan. So, tell me some of your favorite moments as a New York Jets fan. And who's your favorite all-time New York Jets player,
Well, moment-wise, I'd probably have to go to the AFC Championship runs. That's when I started becoming a fan of the team back like 2009, 2010. That's when I started watching the Jets. Those defenses, the way they just dominated teams. My favorite moments would be the divisional round playoff game versus the Patriots when we went into Foxborough and upset the Patriots. And then also 2015, week 16, also against the Patriots. That was the last time the Jets had a winning season. And they beat the Patriots, set themselves up. They went into Buffalo and win in your in situation. And they lost the game in Buffalo. Ryan Fitzpatrick threw 4 interceptions. But the game before was like it was like right before Christmas. And the Patriots were a little depleted by injuries. But Brandon Marshall had a fantastic touchdown catch, and then Eric Decker caught the game winner in overtime. I'll forever remember that moment. But besides those moments, since I've been a fan, there really hasn't been many great memories. I've been a fan for a decade, so really all I have to look forward to or look back at are those AFC Championship runs when we lost back-to-back AFC Championship games and then the 2015 season.
Yeah, and I understand your favorite all-time New York Jets player is Darrelle Revis, correct?
Correct.
Talk about his career as a Jet, for a brief amount of time,
Right. He was a phenomenal corner, and he was one of the reasons I watched the Jets. Just him as a player, the way he locked down wide receivers and would shut them out with the great wide receivers, too. It was like Andre Johnson, Randy Moss, just the best wide receivers at the time. He'd shut them out. And that was a lot of fun to watch. And I was in Miami when he tore his ACL, and that was just heartbreaking to see. And he just hasn't been the same since then. But when he was in his prime, he was arguably one of the best corners of all time.
No doubt, no doubt. Now, have you been to any New York Jets games? And if you have, tell us about some of your favorite experiences, at live New York Jets games in person.
Well, like I mentioned going down to Miami to watch a Jets game in Miami when Revis tore his ACL.
Tannehill threw a pick 6, too, in that game to start the second half. They won that game in overtime, too. I went to one game in MetLife. It was a preseason game versus the Falcons. Sam Darnold's first game in MetLife, too. and he rolled his first touchdown. He rolled out and was able to hit, I want to say probably Robbie Anderson in the end zone. I've also watched 2 Jets games in Detroit. One was Jets Bills when the Bills got snowed out and they moved the game to Detroit. That was a long time ago. And then Sam Darnold's first career start in Detroit. That game started bad for me. I'm surrounded by Lions fans. Sam Darnold throws a pick 6 on his first pass. I'm like, oh gosh, it's going to be a long night. And then the Jets just stomped on the Lions. And that was just a lot of fun being around all those Lions fans like, haha, suckers. But that was probably my most fun game being at because of just how bad we dominated that game.
Gotcha. Well, Caleb, we're going to move on to, some New York Jets news. Obviously, you guys have now hired a new head coach. His name is Robert Saleh. Personally, I actually do like the hire. When I actually covered and broke the story, I said that Robert Saleh to me is the exact opposite of Adam Gase. Adam Gase was actually brought in to be the guy to develop and get the most out of Sam Darnold, and he couldn't do that at all. He was just not a good head coach. Only won 9 games in his 2 years as the head coach with the Jets. He had a 9-23 record, 9 wins, 23 losses. Obviously, he was brought in to develop Sam Darnold. That did not work out at all. Sam Darnold has regressed during his time with Adam Gase. I feel sorry for Sam Darnold. And you look at Adam Gase, several players, that have escaped his offensive system have gone to do really good things. You look at Ryan Tannehill. People thought that he was a first-round bust in Miami. Well, it turns out he goes to Tennessee with a great roster, gets coached by Mike Vrabel. He's playing some really good football. He's a legitimate franchise quarterback playing in a much different system, and it's pretty clear that Adam Gase was the problem as far as screwing Ryan Tannehill's development. You look at Devontae Parker, another wide receiver that was in Adam Gase's system. People said, oh, Devontae Parker's a first-round bust. He gets away from that system. He looks like a first-round wide receiver. So we've seen several players, be really just held back by Adam Gase's system, and whatnot. And I think that Robert Saleh, look, he's a defensive-minded guy. He's not an offensive-minded guy. The Jets went the opposite direction, but I'm okay with that because, you look at Bill Belichick, a big reason why Tom Brady was able to win so many Super Bowls is because Bill Belichick held that defense down, you know what I'm saying? And you look at, Terry Bradshaw, you look at Joe Montana, you look at Tom Brady. They're great all-time Hall of Fame quarterbacks, but they always had really good defenses. And if you can find a dynamic quarterback or get the most out of Sam Darnold, if you're holding teams under 30 points a game pretty much every Sunday, you're gonna win a lot of football games. So I really like the fact that the Jets actually hired a defensive-minded guy. Robert Saleh seems like a very fiery guy with energy. He's going to, really zero in on developing players. That's something Adam Gase really did not do. He was reluctant to develop players, did not make adjustments. The team seemed uninspired, unprepared under him. Robert Saleh, to me, is a breath of fresh air for the New York Jets organization because he's going to come in, he's going to bring that hard-nosed mentality to that franchise. I believe that he's going to go out his way to relate to these players. He seems like a player's head coach. Obviously, the 49ers did really good things when he was the defensive coordinator in San Francisco. They almost won a Super Bowl. No shame in losing to Patrick Mahomes because he's amazing, as well as Andy Reid, a really good head coach. But yeah, I like the Robert Saleh hire. What are your expectations for Robert Saleh? And what was your reaction when the Jets actually hired him? What do you think about the hire?
Well, you pretty much touched on this. He's the anti-Adam Gase. Adam Gase, he was the head coach of the offense, and that was his only thing. And he hired Greg Williams to be the head coach of the defense. He did not have any interactions really with the defense, and it was Adam Gase's offense. If you're not good at this, I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. And you also mentioned they played uninspired. That's why Adam Gase had more losses by double digits than he did wins as the head coach of the New York Jets. It's terrible. And he doesn't light a fire under these guys. And Robert Saleh, phenomenal hire. Absolutely love the hire. And I didn't even think we'd come close to getting him. I thought he was almost a sure thing in Detroit, seeing as he's from the area. He's from Dearborn. And when I was putting together like my list of like candidates that as a Jets fan I'd be interested in and would want to just to hire, I didn't consider him because I thought he was going to Detroit. I thought guys like Matt Campbell. And part of that might be because like you, a University of Toledo student, and him being from here, that would have been really awesome for me as a fan. But one thing that I wanted as for a head coach, and the Jets, when they fired Gase, said they were going to look for is a CEO head coach, a guy that goes and relates to the players, develops the players, and he's a head coach of the entire team, all aspects of it. Robert Saleh fits that mold perfectly. And that shows by he's not even going to be calling defensive plays. His defensive coordinator that he hired, Jeff Ulbrich, is going to be calling the defensive plays. So it gives Saleh more room to just be the head coach of the entire team. And he's a player's guy. And he said in his press conference, like, he's going to do whatever it takes to help make sure his players get the most amount of money possible. So he's going to try putting his players in positions to succeed. And he was pretty much speaking of like them being a family and all gas, no brakes. I love that punchline. All gas, no brakes. From the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you better be giving it your all, and you go to bed better than you wake up. His introductory press conference, I was ready to put on some pads and run through a brick wall. It was not like Dan Campbell's at all. He didn't talk about taking people's kneecaps off. But Robert Saleh said exactly what he needed to. Compared to Adam Gase, where he had like the googly eyes, like what's going on here for his conference. And the staff he's putting together is a legitimate coaching staff too. Adam Gase, his staff, it was a bunch of offensive guys that he brought over from Miami who were just going to be yes men. It's going to be Adam Gase runs the show and no one else really has a voice. Gase never hired a quarterback coach. He hired his buddy Dowell Loggins to be the offensive coordinator, but his main job appeared to be holding the challenge flag. He had no pass game coordinator, no run game coordinator, none of that stuff. Robert Saleh comes in, he hires Mike LaFleur, who is a Shanahan. I mean, he pretty much graduated with an A in the Shanahan School for Offense.
And he's related to Matt LaFleur, who's doing some really good things with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Since Matt LaFleur has gotten to Green Bay, the team, I believe, has gone 13-3, back-to-back seasons, back-to-back NFC Championship game appearances. It obviously helps that he has Aaron Rodgers, but yeah, I think that he's a pretty good offensive coordinator, or at least he projects to be Mike LaFleur.
Right. And he's going to be bringing that Shanahan-style offense, which is going to be a lot of fun to watch. You mentioned Matt LaFleur. I think it's funny. Robert Saleh was Matt LaFleur's best man at his wedding. So he's got that connection with the LaFleur family, and that's why he was able to bring him over from San Francisco. But that was also a sticking point to hiring Saleh as a head coach, is that you are bringing LaFleur. Because that's the issue a lot of times when you hire defensive guys. All right, who's going to run the offense? This league is all about offense, and I've seen Jets fans like, why are we hiring a defensive guy when our offensive coordinator is going to take a head coaching job someday? Really? I don't remember the last time a Jets position coach went somewhere to interview for a better position. So a position coach becoming a coordinator becoming a head coach. That is a problem I will gladly have.
Yeah, and not to really cut you off, but, you look at Bill Belichick. People say, Robert Saleh can't call plays. Well, Bill Belichick never really called the plays in New England. You look at Jimmy Johnson. He's a really good head coach, great head coach. He never was known for his play calling. So as long as Robert Saleh gets the right guys in the building to, do the things that he knows he can't do and allow them to execute that at a high level, I think that he's definitely going to have some success.
Right. And the staff he's hiring a diverse amount of guys. He's hiring young guys, veteran guys, and people that are going to collaborate and they're going to have competitive mindsets. We didn't have that the last 2 years, maybe 3 years. 2 years definitely with Adam Gase because they were all yes men. He never had anyone challenging him on anything. We have an actual quarterback coach, Rob Calabrese, who almost started a game this year for the Denver Broncos instead of Kendall Hilton. So we got an actual quarterback coach, a legitimate offensive line coach. We brought over John Benton from the 49ers to be the offensive line coach and the run game coordinator. Benton, look at his offensive line that he helped develop in San Francisco. They have a good offensive line, and they were missing pieces. So he's bringing a good, diverse staff. Jeff Ulbrich, who's going to be calling the defensive plays, he got to call some defensive plays towards the latter half of the Falcons season. I thought he did a pretty good job. The Falcons defense played a lot better with him at the helm. Now, I don't know if that was more him or Raheem Morris, but still, he had a say. And the development of players was huge. The 49ers, I think his defense this year was better than last year. If you look at like what he had to work with, they had the number 6 defense in the NFL. They were missing Nick Bosa. DeForest Buckner was traded. Eric Armstead was gone. Richard Sherman. They were just depleted with injuries, and yet they still were the number 6 defense in the NFL. That just shows that he knows how to put players in the right positions to succeed, while also developing players too and helping them get better. That's exactly what the Jets need right now. He is the perfect guy, and I have no doubt that he's going to be a good coach. And I am so glad he came to the Jets. And what mind boggles me is he wanted the Jets job. The Jets were not a top 3 coaching job, in my opinion. They lost that right when they lost out on the first overall pick. And we got arguably a top 3 candidate. How he managed that one? No idea. I think that goes to show like what Joe Douglas, new general manager, the culture he's bringing in, and the structure he's building there. Robert Saleh got to his car before he left on a plane for Philly. No, to Florida to meet with Philly. Called his wife and said, if they call, we're going to New York. There was no like back and forth, like arguing between teams. He wanted the Jets job. And that's almost a breath of fresh air for us too, because like, whoa, people might actually want to come to New York now. Where in the past it's like, all right, if you've got it, like Joe Douglas is an example, not just players, but personnel. Joe Douglas, we wanted him to be the general manager. And he's proven that he should get a general manager job. He worked with the Eagles. He helped build the Super Bowl team there. He was on the Ravens staff for a while. Joe Douglas, he was rising through the ranks and highly respected throughout the league. So when they fired Mike Maccagnan after the draft, which was really dumb, but it's the Jets, they went after Joe Douglas. And they kept going after him. And he said no. They go after him again. He said no. Until they got him a 6-year contract. It's like, all right, fine. If you're going to give me 6 years, you're going to give me time to rebuild this thing from the ground up. All right, let's do this. And we've had to overpay for free agents in the past. Now it's because we couldn't get free agents to come to New York without overpaying.
Now, I mean, some of the stuff that players are saying, like Richard Sherman is telling guys to go play for Saleh. That players might, I mean...
That speaks volume to him by a lot.
Exactly. Coming from Richard Sherman, it means a lot. But we still got to see how the offseason plays out. It's very early on. But as a fan, I'm very excited for the future for the first time in a long time.
Got it. I think that Robert Saleh kind of looked at the amount of draft capital and cap space that the Jets had, and that's really what kind of drove him to potentially, go to New York. And obviously, expectations are kind of low, obviously, because you're a New York team. There's going to be some fans that are riled up and want the team to do so good so early. So, look, it's gonna take some time. The Jets are not going to be this playoff team in year number 1, but I do think that Robert Saleh definitely can turn them around. We'll see what he can do going forward. I want to now transition to Sam Darnold. I want to ask you this question, Caleb, as a New York Jets fan. Would you move on from Sam Darnold? Would you trade him away and get some draft capital for him? Or would you stick with Sam Darnold and use the number 2 overall pick to maybe draft a wide receiver, maybe draft an offensive tackle, maybe improve the defense, maybe trade down or whatnot? Personally, I'm not the biggest Sam Darnold fan. In the past, I've said that he was very overrated coming out of USC. I thought the pick was a good pick when the Jets actually made the pick, but I did not think Darnold was as good as most people thought that he was. People said that he was a generational talent. I personally didn't see it, but I thought that he could become a very good, solid starting quarterback. But ultimately, I think that you got to move on from Sam Darnold. I've gone into details about this in previous episodes on the show. I will get to my reasons as to why I believe so, kind of after you give your little soliloquy. So, what do you do if you're the Jets general manager? You know, are you moving on from Darnold, or are you keeping him? What have you seen from him?
Well, that's the one thing that hurts about not having the first overall pick this year and not being able to draft Trevor Lawrence. If we would have gotten the first overall pick, the decision would be so much easier to make. Now you have to wonder, you touched on how players leave Gase and get better. So it's like, all right, will Darnold get better? What's left of Darnold? Can we fix him up? And
the LaFleur offense, or the Shanahan offense, what LaFleur is going to bring in, is a style of offense that could make Darnold work. However, I've watched him his rookie season. He was trending up. Against the Packers, he went toe-to-toe with Aaron Rodgers in that game. And the end of his rookie season, he was playing good. And it's like, all right, we might have a legitimate quarterback on our hands. Since Adam Gase came in, he just kept plummeting. And this past season, he was the worst statistical quarterback in the NFL. His completion percentage is just awful. His decision-making is not right. His footwork is terrible. That comes with not having a quarterback coach. And his reads, I mean, he got to a point where if you look at the latter half of the season for him, it's like, all right, he cut down the turnovers. He wasn't pushing the ball downfield. He barely hit 150 yards passing in most of his games. It was a lot of checkdowns. He just didn't trust himself. He's got to fix it up here. And I think it's best for him to go somewhere else. And I love the Sam Darnold pick from the beginning. When they made the pick, I'm like, all right, I think we got something here. I was very excited about Darnold. But watching him play especially this past season, and seeing how he was from a clean pocket too. From a clean pocket, only two quarterbacks had worse completion percentages than Darnold. Trubisky and Wentz. That's not good. From a clean pocket, you're supposed to be more accurate, not less. And Darnold, he's best at when it's like backyard football, and he just moves around and makes plays like that. And he makes one or two of those a game where it's like, all right, he's got something. And then he makes more plays that are like, I don't know. I think his ceiling right now might be mid-tier Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's like, it could win you a couple games if he gets it fixed, but it's not a franchise saver. And when you have the number 2 overall pick, it's a hopefully rare opportunity to take someone that you think is a generation, or maybe not generational talent, but a good quarterback. You hope to never pick that high again. And if you roll a Darnold this year, that's a huge risk. I almost think that's riskier than taking a quarterback at 2, because you'd have to pick up his 5th-year option. You'd end up more than likely picking up his 5th-year option, which is $25 million. So you're taking on that hit. And then say he wins a couple. Saleh, I believe he's going to be able to win a couple games just because the schedule will be a little easier. Last year's schedule was brutal. Just absolutely brutal. And I think the Jets will be able to win a couple games because Saleh will put them in places to succeed along with LaFleur on the offense. But then come the show that Darnold's not the right guy. So you could be picking at like 10, 15, something like that. I'm just...
You're looking big picture. You're not just looking at this upcoming year. You're looking at big picture. You think that Darnold is not a high enough you don't think his ceiling is as high enough to where, okay, he's going to be a legitimate game-changing franchise quarterback. That's kind of where you're going, right?
Right. He's got like maybe Alex Smith, Jimmy Garoppolo type level. Like that's what I see. And then in a year from now, are we going to be in a position if we keep Darnold where it's like
you're going to pay him a crap ton of money eventually, because even guys like Jared Goff and like Kirk Cousins, they cost a lot of money. It's a lot of money for a franchise quarterback. And I'll get to it in a little bit. You know, I'll let you finish your point, but I kind of want to, say, okay, this is my perspective on Darnold. Okay, obviously I talked about how I really didn't like him. Coming out of USC, I liked him, but I didn't love him like some of the scouts saying that he was going to be this generational talent. I just didn't see it. And really, when you look at the quarterbacks, you look at Justin Fields, Trey Lance. Let's say maybe the Jaguars, for whatever reason, pass with Trevor Lawrence, okay? You look at Fields, Lance, and Lawrence. I'm not the biggest Zach Wilson fan. I think that you're a pretty big Zach Wilson fan. But let's just, focus on some of these quarterbacks. I truly think that Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and Trey Lance, those three guys, they have a higher upside than Sam Darnold. So when you're looking at if you should move on from Sam Darnold, you're not going to move on from Sam Darnold if you think the next guy has a lower ceiling. That will be a dumb decision. I think that Fields, Lance, and Lawrence have bigger arms and they're better athletes. And you look at Darnold, I just don't see the trait that says, wow. You look at Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, Drew Brees, special accuracy. You look at Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, special athletic traits. They can move around. They're playmakers. You look at Mahomes, Big Ben. You look at Stafford. You look at Josh Allen. You look at Herbert. Rockets for arms. I don't see Darnold having a rocket arm. I just don't. You look at Baker Mayfield. He has that charisma about him. There's something about him. Darnold just seems a little too timid for me. And I didn't even mention guys like Dak Prescott, Ryan Tannehill, and Jared Goff and Matt Ryan who have been to Super Bowls. You look at Carson Wentz, he fell apart this year, but Carson Wentz is a more talented quarterback than Sam Darnold. You look at Derek Carr, he had a great year this past year. Obviously didn't win a whole lot of games, but that was mainly on the Raiders defense. So I named you roughly 18 to 19 quarterbacks that either are better than Darnold right now or have shown in the past they can be better than Darnold, okay? So once you get past the 16 to 18 range, I think there's about 16 to 18 franchise quarterbacks that I can say year in and year out, they give me a good chance to win a whole lot of games. I can sell jerseys and whatnot. Darnold, I don't think he meets the criteria. I think that he just doesn't have that ceiling, and he's reckless at times. He's not all that accurate at times. He makes poor decisions. And you talked about his accuracy from a clean pocket. It's awful. People kind of look at, when a quarterback's in a bad situation, they just blame everything on the bad situation. They blame the missed wide open throws because he's being coached by Adam Gase. Yes, being coached by Adam Gase and not having great weapons, not having a great offensive line definitely is not helping your quarterback. But if you're missing open wide receivers and making dumb decisions and just turning the football over and making, bad reads that are inexcusable, that are rookie mistakes, that's where I say, okay, it's just time to move on. And you may never be in another situation where you could right the wrong. I'm not saying Darnold's a bad quarterback. If Sam Darnold goes to maybe the Colts or another team, he could be a solid starting quarterback that can win games. But I don't think he's a long-term franchise quarterback. I just don't. I think the risk is too high, to say, okay, we're going to bank on Darnold for another year. It's really tempting for me to say, okay, by the way, I'm not a Jets fan for you people out there. I'm not. It's really tempting for me to say, man, draft Devontae Smith to pair with Denzel Mims because that's scary, okay, if they reach their full potential. Or, draft a Penei Sewell. But look, Penei Sewell, Devontae Smith, if you don't have a legitimate franchise quarterback to go toe-to-toe with the Patrick Mahomes of the world, it's not going to matter. So that's where I'm at. Do you think that my criticism is fair?
Absolutely. And I think in this league, if you don't have a top 15 quarterback, then you're at least wondering then you have question marks at quarterback. You want a guy that's in the top half of the league. Darnold isn't. And if you think any of these guys that could be there too, either are currently better than Darnold or in 3 years could project to be better than Darnold, you move on from Darnold and go with a cheaper option now and build around that. And the thing that really proved to me that it's not all Gase and some of it was Darnold. Joe Flacco started games, was in the same situation as Sam Darnold, and I get Flacco's a seasoned veteran.
But Darnold was a number 3 overall pick?
Yes. Joe Flacco played much better. He played much better with the same weapons, same offensive line, same head coach calling plays. So seeing that was really Darnold just isn't it. And you touched on some quarterbacks in the draft. I am high on Zach Wilson. I liked his mobility in the pocket. He makes a lot of NFL type throws where it's like laser point. And with the LaFleur offense, it's like he's built for this type of offense. The way his skill set is, I would be perfectly fine if we took Justin Fields, though. I think he'd be a bit of a project. He seems to have a timing issue where he holds onto the ball too long. He gets into trouble by making decisions when he's down and needs to play hero. but he's got his arm.
He's got the physical tools. He may not hit the ground running right away, but you look at his physical tools and you say, Justin Fields, he projects to be better than Sam Darnold. I actually kind of want to, transition to, who you guys might take, in a brief second. But before we do that, I just wanted to say, okay, if Sam Darnold were to get traded to another team, if you're Sam Darnold, where do you want to go potentially? What situation do you think will be good for Sam Darnold? Personally, for me, I thought about this. I think the Carolina Panthers make a lot of sense for Sam Darnold. Now, if the Carolina Panthers can go out there and draft, someone like Trey Lance or Justin Fields, or they can trade for Deshaun Watson, then, just say goodbye. Just say bye-bye to Sam Darnold. But if I'm Sam Darnold, I want to go to a situation where I'm going to be properly developed, I'm going to have good players around me, and I have a good head coach. I think Matt Rule is actually a really good head coach that's on the rise. I was a huge fan of Matt Rule back when he was at Baylor. And the thing about Sam Darnold, if he goes to the Carolina Panthers, is this. He's not going to be asked to start and play right away. He can sit for maybe a year behind Teddy Bridgewater, really learn Joe Brady's offense, and if the Panthers, save that first overall pick, I believe they have the number 8 overall pick, maybe they drafted Kyle Pitts or another wide receiver. You've already got Robbie Anderson. You've already got DJ Moore. You've already got Curtis Samuel. I think that if I'm Sam Darnold, I want to go to a place like Carolina because Carolina, they gave Matt Rule all the power in the world. He's going to get a couple of years to get this thing right. He's now in the hot seat, so he has all the time in the world to properly develop Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold can take his time, learn that playbook, and ultimately, I believe Carolina actually is really a quarterback away from really maybe overtaking, the NFC South division, especially if Drew Brees and Tom Brady retire within the next 2 years. So I think that if Sam Darnold were, looking at a situation to go to, it'd be Carolina. Do you think Carolina would be a good fit, or do you like somewhere else?
I haven't really considered Carolina, but now that you mention it, I do like the fit. I'm a big fan of Matt Rule. I was really disappointed when we did not hire Matt Rule and instead hired Adam Gase, but that's a whole other story. I'm a big fan of that, and him working with Joe Brady. If he sits behind Teddy Bridgewater, if they decide to keep him, then that'd be a really good fit. Before the Steelers signed Dwayne Haskins, I was high on him going to Pittsburgh. I thought he'd have time there to mature, develop. Not mature. He's one of the most mature quarterbacks the Jets have ever had.
He's a grown-up.
He's for seeing as he's like maybe a year or two older than us. Yeah,
I believe he's 23 years old. He's still got a ways to go, as far as his potential.
He needs to earn it. He needs to develop properly and probably sit for a little bit. So Indianapolis, or he goes back to California like San Francisco. Shanahan can make just about any quarterback work. He's made Jimmy Garoppolo, who is all right.
He got to a Super Bowl with Garoppolo. No disrespect to Garoppolo.
He's like that in that 18 to 20 type quarterback range. Like that's kind of where he ranks in my eyes. So I think San Francisco, Indianapolis. I do like the Carolina fit though. And he just needs to go somewhere where he's not asked to start. He's not asked to start immediately. He needs somewhere that's going to develop him, has a good culture, and let him sit and learn.
Yeah, and I was going to say that I think that Darnold actually might have a market just because a lot of people actually, when he was coming out of USC, had him rated as the best quarterback in the draft. Obviously, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have developed properly. They have really off-the-charts physical tools, and they've just taken, those tools and ran with it with really good organizations. But a lot of people had Sam Darnold rated pretty high on their board. So I think that there will be some teams that are going to look to, get Sam Darnold. Hey, man, if you pair Sam Darnold with a Kyle Shanahan or a Matt Rule or Frank Wright, maybe he can turn to something. I do think that he can become a solid starting quarterback one day, but only time will tell. So enough with Darnold. We'll probably talk about Darnold a little bit later, but let's talk about that number 2 overall pick. You mentioned earlier that you would potentially look to draft Zach Wilson with the number 2 overall pick because you think that you like Darnold, you think he can succeed somewhere else, but you think it's time to move on. So with the number 2 overall pick, who do you think right now today should be the guy that just drafted? What quarterback do you want?
I think I mentioned earlier, Zach Wilson is almost a perfect fit for that offense. I think he'd be a lot of fun to watch there. Throwing to Denzel Mims. We have the 23rd pick too, so maybe we take a wide receiver there. Because Devontae Smith could fall. They're saying Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase are possibly rated higher than him. I don't know if he falls to 23, but hey, you never know how the board's going to fall. I think we go quarterback. The only way we don't go quarterback is if the Jets do retain and keep Sam Darnold and decide they want to try building around him again. And then at that point, you're considering Sewell or Smith, or I wouldn't take Sewell. We have Mekhi Becton at the left tackle, and Sewell is more of a left tackle than a right tackle. But also George Fant, we signed him in the offseason, and he was a solid right tackle. And I think he'll do better in this zone running scheme that they're going to run. And I wouldn't really take a tackle when you could attack or address other positions as well. I don't really see tackle as being a top need this year, which is odd for me to say because, like the last couple of years, you give me any offensive lineman, I'll take it. But I think we go quarterback at 2, and it's probably going to be Zach Wilson unless something comes out like character issues or anything like that, or Justin Fields. Trey Lance, there's a little bit more questions on like how high, like obviously he's got a high ceiling, kind of like Josh Allen coming out. I was not high on Allen because I saw that was a year I was watching a lot of college quarterbacks because Jets were picking up 3, traded up to 3. But I watched a lot of Josh Allen. I'm like, I just didn't come away impressed. He had a rocket arm, but he was just not accurate. He had a low floor, but a high ceiling, clearly. Trey Lance is kind of in that same boat. Small school. I don't really know how low or high his floor is. So he'll probably he's not going to make it out of the top 10. He's going to be drafted somewhere in the top 10. 2 might be a little early, but we're also early in the process too. But right today, I'd take Zach Wilson.
Got it. Personally, for me, I'm not torn on who I would take, but the decision for me would come down to Justin Fields or Trey Lance. I understand that Zach Wilson is probably a little more pro-ready than a guy like Justin Fields or a guy like Trey Lance, but I just look at their physical tools, and I think their ceiling is actually higher than Zach Wilson. You look at Justin Fields, I mean, the guy is 6'3", got a big-time rocket arm, can throw the deep ball pretty well. I mean, we saw what he did versus Clemson in the semifinal game. That was an unbelievable performance, and he obviously didn't, do all that great versus Alabama, but I mean, if you can't beat Alabama, I'm not going to hold that against you too much. So, personally, I think that Justin Fields has a higher ceiling than Zach Wilson. Not saying Zach Wilson's a bad prospect, but I just think that when you're drafting number 2 overall, even if the guy is not ready to hit the ground running right away, I just want that off-the-charts potential. And same thing with Trey Lance. I mean, I look at Trey Lance, and people think that might be crazy, but I see a mixture of some Russell Wilson and Cam Newton. He runs like Cam Newton, and his deep ball at times looks like Russell Wilson. Not saying he's going to be close to Russell Wilson or Cam Newton, but I won't be shocked if he becomes, a top 10 to top 5 quarterback one day. The guy is 6'4", about 230, can run around, make plays, fit the ball in the tight windows. His accuracy does need work, but I think that with good coaching, you can fix those things. So for me personally, if I was in the Jets seat, I would look to take someone like Justin Fields or Trey Lance. But I can understand why someone would look at Zach Wilson, but we'll see, man.
Right.
Yeah. So, obviously, Deshaun Watson wants out of Houston. And personally, I don't blame Deshaun Watson for wanting out of Houston because he's been poorly supported in that organization, between the head coaches, the front office, the lack of an offensive line, the lack of a run game, the defense falling apart this year. It's just a mess in Houston. I don't think Deshaun Watson is flat out happy. And ultimately, I think that he's right now one of the top, 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. I would hate to see his career get wasted away. People say, well, Deshaun Watson should sit and stay with one organization like Philip Rivers did, like Matthew Stafford did. And it's nice for those players to sit there and be loyal to a franchise, but at the same time, I think to myself, what if Philip Rivers was a little bit more bullish and said, I want to go somewhere else, I think that I like the fact that Deshaun Watson, is kind of pushing back on his organization and holding them accountable. Now, one team that Deshaun Watson has been linked to is the New York Jets. So, Caleb, I want to ask you this question. The Jets obviously need a franchise quarterback for the future. We think Sam Darnold has something, but maybe with another team, we kind of think that it's time to move on from him. Obviously, guys like Fields, Lance, Wilson, they are guys you could draft. But you look at Deshaun Watson, he's a proven commodity in the NFL. It is one of the rarest things to get a guy that's 25 years old, that's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL in his prime, and he's on the market. And you guys have a ton of draft capital, and I think you guys can go get him. So, do you want the Jets to trade for Deshaun Watson? What are the pros and cons of that?
All I hear is pros. If we get a top 5 quarterback, arguably top 3 quarterback, depending on where you rank quarterbacks on the team, I take that.
So you want them to do it?
Absolutely. Because here's the thing: there's a lot of factors that go into it. We have the number 2 pick, number 23 pick. We have 2 first-round picks next year. We have 2 third-round picks this year. If we trade Sam Darnold, what I'm hearing and reading a lot is at least a second-round pick. So this year, we could possibly have 2 1s, 2 2s, 2 3s, and 2 2s next year. We have more than enough to trade for Deshaun Watson and still be able to build around him. And if Deshaun Watson comes to New York, Deshaun Watson, Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And really, I don't care when you have a franchise quarterback, unless you're a terrible organization like the Texans have proven to be, you're going to find ways to build around them. And the Jets can do that. You have guys like Allen Robinson liking stuff on Twitter about the Jets going and trying to, or how they should go get Deshaun Watson. Allen Robinson's going to be a free agent this year. So it kind of makes you wonder, if Deshaun Watson goes to the Jets, might Allen Robinson join him too? And then you have Allen Robinson, you have Denzel Mims, Jamison Crowder in the slot, he's a good slot receiver. You're building a solid offense right there. And you need a good offense to win games. And I'm seeing like stuff on Jets Twitter and social media, like, he won 4 games last year. He won 4 games last year because the team is bad.
There is not a single starting quarterback that could have made the playoffs with the 2020 Houston Texans roster and coaching staff. I've said that in the past. Not a single starting quarterback. Not Mahomes, not Aaron Rodgers, not Tom Brady. No one.
He led the league in passing yards and only won 4 games. Yeah, he almost had 5,000 passing yards. So I wouldn't. The only cons would be that we'd lose draft picks. So what? So what if we lose some draft picks? We have enough to be able to recoup and still be able to build. It's not like we're mortgaging the entire future for the guy. You're essentially trading this year's first-round pick and Jamal Adams for Deshaun Watson. Yes. In a heartbeat, yes. Now, will he want to come to New York? That's another question, too. Like, they have owners' instability, and that's kind of his issue in Houston right now, is he doesn't like the owner. Understandably so. So maybe he doesn't want to come to New York because he's heard of instability with their ownership. Even though the Jets do look like they're trending in the right direction to becoming a functional franchise again, there's still a lot of work to be done. And because Watson has a no-trade clause, he'd have to okay any trade. So if the Texans get a trade from the Jets or the Dolphins, and Texans go to Deshaun Watson and say, these 2 teams have offered trades for you that we're willing to accept, Watson would have to sign off on going to one of those, and which team he'd be willing to waive his no-trade clause for. So that's the biggest issue here is, would he really want to come to New York? And he was in New York recently. He was in the area of the stadium. He was posting that on his Instagram story. So that's kind of when the whole Jets stuff started, was he was in the area and just linking that. I would love to see him in green and white. If he gets traded, I will buy a jersey that day. And I need more jerseys of players that are actually on the team, seeing as I have none. But I would love to see Deshaun Watson in New York. I ultimately think he gets traded to the NFC. I think the Texans are going to do whatever they can to get him out of the NFC. like San Francisco, Washington, they'd be a contender with Watson right there. Or Carolina is another team too that I think he could do well in Carolina. Miami, I do not want to see him in Miami
because
understandably so, because they're in your division.
We just got out of 2 decades of Tom Brady. We are currently in the next decade with Josh Allen. Could we not have Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson, please? And it'd rewrite the wrong of Mike McCagnon back in 2017 he was drafted. We chose Jamal Adams over Deshaun Watson. Wouldn't it be something else if we get Deshaun Watson because of our trade with Jamal Adams? Because if it's not for that trade, we are not in this position right now. And we have enough cap room to take on his contract and still add free agents. So if he wants to come to New York, write a blank check and sign and have the Jets sign it at that point.
Yeah. I think Deshaun Watson is the 4th best quarterback in the NFL. I have him behind Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, and Russell Wilson, just because those 3 guys have been to and have won Super Bowls. Look, I do like Josh Allen a lot, but Josh Allen's had one great season, and Deshaun Watson actually beat him in the playoffs last year. You look at Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's amazing. I really do like Lamar Jackson, but I think that Deshaun Watson can make more out of less. He's a little bit more accurate. I think that I'll take him in the playoffs over a guy like Lamar Jackson. And as good as Tom Brady is at 43 years old, Tom Brady needs a really good offensive line. There's a reason why he went to Tampa Bay, because he needed good players around him. So I love Tom Brady, but can't take him over Deshaun Watson if I'm starting a team today. So I think Deshaun Watson is a borderline elite quarterback. I think that he's right there. He needs a little more around him to win, obviously, because he only won 4 games this past year. But, I mean, hey, that's not a huge knock on the guy. The guy is an amazing player. He's really accurate, makes really good plays down the field, can make plays off schedule. He's a really phenomenal human being as well, So I think that Deshaun Watson definitely needs to try to get out of Houston and whatnot. I would love to see him with the 49ers. Actually, I wouldn't like to see it, just because I'm a Packers fan. But if I'm a guy that's rooting for Deshaun Watson, him in San Francisco with Nick Bosa in that defense and, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Kyle Shanahan calling the plays, that'd be great. And I do think that Miami should be next up on his list, just because they have a really good defense. They have some decent weapons, and they have a lot of draft picks as well to where they can build around him. So I think that Miami and San Francisco are the 2 places he should want to go to. But I do think the Jets make the most sense, because as far as what teams should be trying to pursue him the most, because they have the draft capital and they need a franchise quarterback. So, and look, the Texans are going to want a lot back for Deshaun Watson, so you could potentially maybe throw Sam Darnold in that, trade, and the number 2 overall pick, and a couple other players, and we'll see what the Houston Texans are cooking with. I don't think their franchise is this franchise you should believe in, but yeah, I think Deshaun Watson, him to the Jets makes some sense, at least from the Jets' perspective. We'll see if Deshaun Watson actually wants to go there, but yeah, only time will tell.
Having that number 2 overall pick for the Texans would be huge, because then they can turn it around into someone that they can say, like, this is our next future. They can turn that into a Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, whoever they decide should be Deshaun Watson's successor. And if you trade with like the Washington football team, they're drafting
18. Their 19th pick. 19th pick.
How are you supposed to sell a fan base on that? We just got rid of our franchise quarterback. We have no idea who our quarterback's going to be next year, but come buy some tickets. So having that number 2 overall pick is going to be huge in a negotiation with the Texans, and that's why Miami also makes sense, because they have, the Texans' first-round pick from this year. They have the number 3 overall pick. So you're hoping that if you trade to either New York or Miami, you're getting a top 3 quarterback in this class, and also some additional draft picks and whatever else you get in a Watson trade. So I think those 2 teams make the most sense for the Texans, but I agree with you on the whole Watson thing, where if I'm Watson, I'd want to go to Miami or San Francisco.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We'll see where Deshaun Watson goes. So, Caleb, obviously the Jets this past year only won 2 games, but there is some bright spots on this Jets team, just a couple, not a bunch of them, but there's a couple. You got Denzel Mims, who projects to me to be a number one wide receiver if he can reach his full potential. You look at a guy like Quinnen Williams. Personally, I actually had Quinnen Williams rated as the best player in his draft class. Now, obviously, guys like Nick Bosa and Kyler Murray have kind of taken, the title of best player in that draft. But Quinnen Williams, he really burst onto the scene this year. A lot of people thought that he was going to be a bust after his rookie year, really, having a disappointing performance. But I could see him becoming a top 3 defensive tackle very, very soon. You look at a guy like Mekhi Becton, guy stepped right in, was a hit at left tackle. He looks to be a cornerstone for the future. And you guys obviously have some draft picks. So, Caleb, what do you think right now is the brightest spot on the New York Jets roster? As maybe you could talk about the picks or the players. What do you think?
Well, with the current roster, I'd say the D-line is very talented. Quinnen Williams, Robert Saleh and Jeff Albrecht are going to bring in a 4-3 style defense. And Quinnen Williams projects to be almost like an Eric Armstead in that defense, I could see him dominating people. And his rookie season was kind of disappointing, but he dealt with an injury. I don't remember what the injury was. Foot, hand. It was some sort of injury that he dealt with the entire season. And this season, he more than doubled his numbers. He played phenomenal, and he played like he deserved to be drafted number 3 overall. So, Quinnen Williams there. John Franklin Myers was a waiver claim from the Rams. Not this past season, but the year prior that Joe Douglas was able to get. And he played really well next to Williams. Fali Fatukasi, he played very well too. He was a 6th-round pick a couple years ago. So the D-line has potential. If they get an edge rusher, that it's going to be lights out. And this defense needs an edge rusher. If they're running 4-3, cover 3, they're going to need someone on the edge to get to the quarterback. And if they are able to get that, I have no problems with the defensive line. I also like Mekhi Becton, just watching him plow people almost every play. He held his ground against the Chargers, and he went up against both Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. I don't think he gave up a sack in that game. That's impressive. For a rookie, that's impressive. He's a mountain of a man. And the Jets' best run plays, coincidentally, when they ran right behind Mekhi Becton. The offensive line is looking... That's one thing Joe Douglas did last offseason. He wanted to rebuild the offensive line. And in a way, he did. He got Mekhi Becton. I mentioned George Fant earlier. Tackles positions are settled. Connor McGovern, he's a good placeholder for now. He improved on the latter half of the season. They've claimed Pat Elflein, former Buckeye, off waivers, and he played really well too in the latter half of the year. So they get a guard. Offensive line could be not phenomenal, but competent. So there are, like you mentioned, young pieces. Up front in the trenches is probably where the Jets are the best right now, because skill position groups need a lot of work. Denzel Mims, I think if he stays healthy, he'll be a pretty good receiver, but you got to get another guy opposite of Mims. Jameson Crowder isn't that guy. He's more of a slot. Running back position, there's a couple guys that can get carries and get decent yards, but you don't have an every down back. But then again, Shanahan didn't really need an every down back. And if that's the offense that's coming in, maybe you don't focus too much on the running back position and just hope that they're able to scheme plays open like Shanahan did. The cornerback group, I'm a little bit worried about. They need to get a solid corner over there. They drafted Bryce Hall in the 5th round last year. And he played, when he came back from injury, he played really well. So that's one side is fine, but you still got to get at least one other corner, some depth. Marcus May, he needs to be re-signed. He is a very talented safety, and I think without Jamal Adams there, he proved that even more. And CJ Mosley will hopefully be back next year too. So the defense should be good if they get another corner. But where they're strongest right now is in the trenches.
Yep. So I wanted to get your thoughts on Joe Douglas, the New York Jets general manager. A lot of Jets fans are kind of split on the guy. Some people are believers in Joe Douglas. Some people are non-believers in Joe Douglas. Where do you stand on Joe Douglas today or right now?
I trust Joe Douglas. The non-believers are probably pointing to some of his free agent signings from last season, which understandably so. But you have to look at the contracts he gave them. He gave a bunch of guys 1-year deals. He wasn't building for this year. It looked like he was getting placeholders, stopgaps. It's like he didn't expect to win this season, which I don't know how that might rub you the wrong way. But he looked at this team and realized it's going to take more than one season for me to rebuild. I'll get a couple stopgap pieces and fill the holes later. And that's what he did. Rashad Perriman, 1-year deal. His biggest mistake was not re-signing Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson played very well in Carolina. And I think that was part of Sam Darnold's regression too. He didn't have Anderson anymore. So he missed out on that one. But George Fant, Connor McGovern, he essentially 1-year deals for them. I think they got like 3 years, but they're no more guaranteed money, if I'm correct. I know that's how Fant's contract is. He's got no more guaranteed money, so if they want to release him, go ahead. McGovern, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's kind of that same way. So his free agent signings are kind of questionable right now, and we'll have to look at this offseason, see how he does now. But he's a draft guy. That's how he came into this league. He was a scout. And his draft class this year, I loved his draft class. Arguably the best Jets draft class in a long time, which isn't saying much, but it was good. He got his franchise left tackle. He got his stud wide receiver. After he traded down, he was still able to get a stud wide receiver. He got Ashton Davis, who I think he can be a solid rotational guy, at least at strong safety, if not a starter. They are very high on him, so maybe he can prove me wrong there. Michael P. Ryan, good change of pace back. I did not like the James Morgan pick at quarterback. And Bryce Hall, Brandon Mann, punter, got a boot for a leg. And then they got another Cameron Clark, a guard. He was a tackle in college, transitioned to guard. And he played maybe a couple snaps, but if he gets into a camp battle, I think he could possibly beat out Elfline from some of his college tape and how he projects. And either way, his first couple picks were pretty good. He's had a good draft class, and he's bringing stability to the Jets. And that was proven with this hire of Robert Saleh, that there's some stability there. He built a good scouting department and personnel department. He's able to get Phil Savage, Chad Alexander, a lot of respected guys, brought back Rex Hogan. I don't know if these names mean anything, but Phil Savage was a Senior Bowl director. And Chad Alexander came from the Ravens. So he's bringing in a good scouting and personnel staff, bringing that together. And he's building it the right way. It's obviously not going to happen overnight, but I do like what he's done so far and trust that he's going to continue building this team the right way.
Yep, and I'm actually a believer in Joe Douglas as well. We'll see what he can do as far as, building up the New York Jets for the future. I think the future is sort of trending up for the Jets, but we'll see, man. So I think we talked enough about the Jets. Let's talk a little bit about the AFC East as a whole. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills had a big-time run this past year to the AFC Championship game. They were one game away from the Super Bowl, but losing to the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think that there should be any shame in that. Bottom line, Kansas City, they're really good. But let's talk about the Bills a little bit, because you're an AFC East guy, sort of because you're a Jets fan. And I like talking about the AFCs because it's a very interesting division. You look at the Buffalo Bills. I think that they're sort of going to be the team that everyone potentially might be looking up to at least over the next 5 to 7 years, Unless Deshaun Watson enters the division, with the Miami Dolphins or with the Patriots maybe or the Jets, I really don't see any reason why the Bills can't run this division for the next couple of years. You look at their ownership. Their ownership is really good. Brandon Beane, their general manager, has spent money in free agency. He's made really good trades. You look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen has developed splendidly. He, to me, is a legitimate top 10 quarterback in this league. Some people think that he's a top 5 quarterback already. Personally, I would push back on that just a tad bit. Not because of, Josh Allen, but because I think that guys like, Rodgers, Mahomes, Wilson, Watson, Lamar, and even Lamar Jackson, even Tom Brady, just, are a little bit better at their best than Josh Allen. But Josh Allen had an unbelievable year. He's officially a hit. The Buffalo Bills, they stood the course. They said, hey, Josh Allen may not hit the ground running in year number 1, but we're going to stick with this guy. We're going to develop him. We're going to put weapons around him. We're going to retain Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator, and Josh Allen's a franchise quarterback, and he very well could get even better and better as the years go on. You look at this Buffalo Bills team, they got a really good roster, good offensive line, and really good weapons, a solid defense. The Patriots, they could maybe make some noise next year. The Dolphins, if they get their quarterback situation figured out, maybe, but I think Buffalo's the class of this division until proven otherwise. I respect Bill Belichick and the Patriots, but they don't have as many good players as Buffalo. And Sean McDermott, he's not Belichick, but he's a really, really good head coach. He's done a phenomenal job in Buffalo. Big Sean McDermott fan. Do you agree with me that Buffalo's kind of, the team that right now, at least today, is the team that the Patriots, the Dolphins, and the Jets are going to be looking up to, trying to overtake over the next couple of years?
Absolutely. You figure the last 2 decades, it's been looking up at Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and the Patriots. And a couple years ago, the Jets and the Bills were pretty much in the same spot. They both needed franchise quarterbacks. They were turning the team around. One team started trending up, and one team started trending way down. The Bills built that team correctly. They got their guy, and they built around him properly. They got the tools he needed, the players, the Brian Daboll, what he's done with that offense is amazing. They don't have a lot of household names, but they have a lot of good pieces that work, and they build and they work around it. They got Stephon Diggs, and that became the game changer that Josh Allen needed. That was huge, arguably one of the biggest acquisitions this past offseason because of the impact it had. I'd say that was the difference between them making the AFC Championship game and them just being a mediocre wild card team. And that helped Josh Allen's progression. And you look at the Patriots where they stand now. They are not what they were 2-3 years ago. They're torn apart. And this past season, they did have a lot of players that were out with COVID. So we'll see how those players come back next year. But this team is not going to be the same. They're going to have question marks at quarterback until they get that position figured out again. Cam Newton might be a decent placeholder. I'm not sure how they feel on him. He didn't play as well as I expected him to. I expected more from him this past season, but we'll see what they decide to do there. Miami, I say they're the biggest threat to the Bills right now because they do have a solid team. Brian Flores is helping build that team right, and they have good pieces. It just depends on the quarterback position. If Tua can be what the Dolphins hope, or if they are able to get their hands on Watson. If they're able to get their hands on Watson, it'll be between the Bills and the Dolphins in that division, in our division. If they don't, then they'll be like the rest of us trying to chase the Bills, but they'll be closer. The Jets are still in rebuild right now. They don't. I'm not even going to consider them a thought in competing in this division until they prove me otherwise. And so, yes, the Bills are the team to beat, and until further notice, they will be the team to beat for a little while.
Yeah, so I want to move on to Miami a little bit. Brian Flores, really good head coach, has the potential to be the next great head coach, in my opinion. He's one of the Bill Belichick disciples that have been a hit. Okay, we've seen some Bill Belichick disciples be really bad, but we've seen some Bill Belichick disciples be really good. He's in the really good category with a chance to be great. And Miami, they've drafted extremely well. They spent some money in free agency this past year. I felt that they actually arguably had the best offseason out of all NFL teams. They made a huge leap this past year. I did not expect the Miami Dolphins to win 10 games, but due to their defense and due to their great coaching staff, they got something cooking. Now, the big question is Tua the guy? Personally, Dolphins fans get mad at me every time I talk about Tua. Some of them actually have come around to agreeing with me. But look, it's the same thing I said about Sam Darnold earlier. Look, I got nothing against Tua. He seems like a good kid, a good guy, but people were throwing around the generational talent label with Tua. He's a blend of Russell Wilson. He's the next Drew Brees. And I just did not see it at Alabama. I thought that he was a good prospect, but not a great prospect, not this generational talent. And to me, at times, Tua just looked a little overwhelmed his rookie year. He looked like a rookie out there, but the thing about Tua is this. I just don't see the physical traits that are needed for Tua to become a long-term franchise quarterback. So as a result of that, I'm moving on from Tua. I just am. And I know what Dolphins fans are going to say. They're going to say, well, what about Josh Allen? Josh Allen was put into a really bad situation as a rookie because Buffalo was not a good team. I'm not saying the Dolphins were a good team to start the year, but based on what happened during the year, they were winning games with Ryan Fitzpatrick. So, look, and by the way, Josh Allen, even when he was struggling as a rookie, you can see he's got a rocket for an arm. Tua, I just don't see any physical traits that wow me. I think that he is a game-managing quarterback with an average arm. I think that he's, at best, going to be someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, to where if you put a really good team around him, he maybe could get you to a Super Bowl, but I don't ever see him winning you a Super Bowl. I just don't. I thought Tua was a product of a really good offensive line, wide receiver, and running back core at Alabama, and I know that he won some games as a rookie. I understand he's a pretty accurate passer, and he doesn't turn the football over, but his unwillingness to push the ball down the field, and in my opinion, his inability to consistently fit the ball into tight windows, it's a problem for that offense. And Brian Flores, look, I don't agree with the decision to bench Tua every time, something went wrong for the team, but, I mean, if Brian Flores is deciding to bench Tua Tagovailoa, don't you kind of have some weird mixed feelings about the way Flores feels about the guy? I mean, don't you think that he would roll out Tua and say, okay, Tua, let's see if you can handle adversity? And Brian Flores said when he made the switch to Tua that this was going to be the move that gave us the best chance to win. But then when he pulls Tua, you're signaling to that locker room that Ryan Fitzpatrick gives you the best chance to win. And actually, when you look at the offense, Ryan Fitzpatrick was able to push the ball down the field into tight windows. It was a whole totally different offense when Ryan Fitzpatrick was starting games for the Miami Dolphins. I'm not saying Tua is a bad player. And I'd actually take him over Sam Darnold because he's an accurate passer that doesn't make mistakes. But ultimately, I don't see the upside. I don't see the big abilities from Tua. And if you're number 3 overall and Justin Fields is staring you in the face and Trey Lance is staring you in the face, or you have a chance to go out and get like a guy like Deshaun Watson, I'm sorry, but those are better options than Tua going forward. I just think that Tua is a situation where he's always going to be a decent starting quarterback, but you need a lot around him to win, and I don't see it with Tua. Am I crazy to say move on from Tua? What do you think?
No, I don't think you're crazy. I don't know if I would quite move on from. I don't think they're going to unless they get.
I don't think they're going to either. They already said they're not going to. That's the move I would make.
They also hired the quarterback coach that they just hired was Tua's quarterback coach somewhere else. So they already pretty much have committed to Tua. Tua just doesn't wow me. I watch him. It's like game manager. Sam Darnold makes more plays in a game that's like, wow.
And he had a worse roster too.
Yeah, exactly. If you're at number 3, I would consider taking a quarterback or Devontae Smith because he's got that connection with Tua already. So you have that there. I'm not surprised they won 10 games, actually. I watched how the Dolphins finished last season or the previous season. You figure they were projected to be – they were tanking for Tua was the big thing in Miami. And they won five games when they weren't supposed to win like any. And they beat a Patriots team that was still playing for something in week 17. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, all right, Brian Flores is legit, first off. He's putting those players in positions to succeed and doing what's best for that team. And perfectly. He's done a good job so far there. The Tua thing, though, I wasn't high on Tua either coming out of college. I didn't get the whole tanking for Tua thing. I was not a big fan of his. I thought he was maybe late first round, early second round type talent. Like I didn't see him. I didn't think he deserved to be drafted where he was. He's a game manager. He's going to make plays that are not going to lose you football games, but he's not going to be the reason you win them either. He's not going to make the big play at the end of the game or for a 2-minute drill. He's not going to push the ball downfield. It's going to be a lot of 5-yard outs and just easy completions down the like. He's not going to push it past the yard marker, like the 10-yard markers. And if you don't have that as a quarterback, especially in the AFC East when you have to compete against Josh Allen, you have to consider getting a quarterback. The AFC now, you're not just competing against Josh Allen in your division. You're competing against Patrick Mahomes. You're competing against Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. And the AFC, these quarterbacks are depending on what happens with Watson, he might stay in the division, he might not, who knows. So you have to get a quarterback who's going to be able to compete with these guys. And I don't know if Tua is going to be that guy that if it's a shootout, if he's going to be able to win it. And if you're a Dolphins fan, obviously I'm cool with them keeping Tua, if that's what it means, that he can't win a shootout. Because I don't want him winning as much.
In Miami.
Because you're a Jets fan. You're a Jets fan.
Exactly.
It's guilt, or not guilt, but selfish. But if I'm the Dolphins, I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's a reason we kept pulling him out for Ryan Fitzmagic. Fitzmagic, he's gutsy. He is so much fun to watch because he does not care. He's at the point of his career where it's like, I've already made enough money. I'm just going to do whatever I want or try to win. He's not going to try to be conservative. And he makes phenomenal plays. You don't see any of that with Tua. And Fitzpatrick is the best quarterback on that team. And when you draft Tua as high as you did, you kind of need him to be. So I kind of agree where I probably would move on from Tua, but they're not. I don't expect them to move on from Tua unless Watson is available for them.
Yeah, and look, I have a problem with them keeping Tua because that's not the move that I would make, but I understand it just because you drafted him so high. He's still in the rookie,
another year, maybe.
Yeah, he's still in the rookie contract. And look, if you had Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase to that offense along with Devontae Parker, then Tua has some legitimate weapons. I kind of understand why people want to give Tua a pass just because he did win games as a rookie. And he is an accurate passer. There's nothing that I'm saying about Tua to bash the guy, because I think that he actually is a quality starting quarterback. I just don't see the upside. I think that when you have an opportunity with the number 3 overall pick staring you in the face, or you have an opportunity to get a guy like Deshaun Watson, who's already a top 5 quarterback, something Tua is never going to be probably, just from a raw physical, trait standpoint, there's no traits that point to me saying, oh, Tua's going to be a top 5 quarterback. I just don't understand, why people are trying to justify average. And I think Tua is average to slightly above average, but only time will tell about Tua. Last final topic of the day, then we'll get out of here. We'll talk about the Patriots. If you're the New England Patriots, it was a disappointing season for Bill Belichick and the crew, but I do expect the Patriots to be a better football team next year just because they had so many players opt out due to COVID. It was a weird offseason for Cam Newton and the crew. Obviously, no Tom Brady. You're going to obviously, feel the effects of a Hall of Fame legendary quarterback, who knew the system inside and out, not being there. He's able to work with not great weapons at times. Probably not at 43 years old because that's why he went to Tampa. But, Caleb, I got to ask you, what should the Patriots do at quarterback? Should they stick with Cam Newton for another year? Or would you maybe draft someone? Personally, I think the Patriots actually should keep Cam Newton for another year just because it was a weird offseason with no OTAs, complex playbook that Cam Newton had to learn on the fly. He had a bottom 5 wide receiver core. And look, it's all good and dandy if you draft Mac Jones or Justin Fields or Trey Lance, but you got to ask the question, are those guys able to produce at a high level with the current supporting cast that you have? And you can say, oh, we can bring in Matthew Stafford or Deshaun Watson. They have to do the same thing that Cam Newton did. Learn that complex system, adjust on the fly and make a bottom 5 wide receiver core look better than it is. And look, I think the Patriots actually need those assets that they would, need to, use to acquire a guy like Deshaun or Matthew Stafford or even to trade up for a quarterback to actually improve their roster. So until the Patriots are in a situation where they have a competent enough supporting cast to really support their quarterback, I don't think you should move on from Cam Newton. I do think Cam Newton still has a couple of solid years left in him. He obviously had a disappointing season. People could say he threw 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, but they forget he ran for 12 rushing touchdowns. You do realize that rushing touchdowns count for touchdowns as well. You get in the end zone, passing or throwing, I really don't care. So, personally, I'm not saying Cam Newton is great, but it's just one of those situations where I don't know if another guy is going to do all that much better than Cam Newton. Sure, if you get a guy like Watson or Stafford, they'll be better than Newton just because they're more dynamic at this point in their career than what Cam Newton was, but I don't know. I would seriously consider bringing back Cam Newton and trying to improve this wide receiver and tight end core that is not very explosive at all. What do you think?
No, I agree. Cam Newton was thrown into a bad situation in New England. He was signed late into the process. He did not have a lot of time to digest the playbook, and the weapons that he had were not that great. And if you're the Patriots trying to trade for a Stafford and Watson, first of all, I wouldn't want to go there if I'm Stafford or Watson when you could go to better teams. And also, that's kind of like the two opposites. So we talked about the Jets and the Dolphins, how they have capital to trade for Watson, but also can continue building around Watson. Patriots, any of their capital they do have, they'd have to give up to trade for Watson, and then they're stuck with he pretty much be in the same situation he's in right now in Houston, where he doesn't have a good supporting cast around him. So the Patriots should not be in the market. I mean, they're going to be in the market if they can get a quality quarterback and not have to give up as much, but that's just not going to happen. So I could see them keeping Cam Newton, let him play there for another year, maybe draft a quarterback second round, maybe Mac Jones. I'm not high on Mac Jones personally. I think he's a product of a very talented and great Alabama system.
I'm kind of the same boat with you on Mac Jones. I'm not saying he's a bad prospect, but
No.
I just don't know if I'm willing to go all in and say, yeah, that guy's my franchise quarterback, because I think that wherever he goes, he's going to be a product of the situation around him, which is nothing wrong with that, because honestly, the point I'm trying to make is Mac Jones is one of those guys that's going to need a good offensive line because he's not all that mobile. He's going to need a good coaching staff around him because he's not one of those guys that can ad-lib off schedule. He's going to be as good as the situation he's put into. And while I believe he'll get great coaching in New England, I don't know if the players around him are going to be able to elevate him. That's what I'm saying.
No, and the Patriots might look at a Mac Jones like he's almost like a statue. He's not that mobile. It's like, didn't we just win for the last 20 years with a quarterback like that? And they might be intrigued by that option. But I think you don't take a quarterback first round. You take a weapon. You take some offensive help in the first round. The offensive line, I doubt Pitts falls that far. But if he is there, take him. Or a wide receiver. And then take a quarterback like second or third round, like Jamie Newman or someone like that. And you maybe try to develop a second round guy, or see if Jimmy Garoppolo is available. He's already got the New England connection. San Francisco they're linked to just about every quarterback on the market right now. So they're in the market. Maybe bring back Jimmy G. That was a guy that Bill Belichick liked anyway and wanted to keep until Robert Kraft stepped in and said, we're not getting rid of Tommy. You can get rid of Jimmy. We're keeping Tommy. So maybe that's an option for them as well. But if Jimmy Garoppolo is not an option, you keep Cam Newton. See if Jared Stidham develops anymore, because for some reason they're high on him. I haven't seen enough from Stidham, but I don't know. I'm not there at practice. So maybe let him compete with Cam again. Keep it an open competition again this year and bring in another young guy. But the Patriots, they need help on offense. And that's Bill Belichick is arguably the best head coach of all time. He is terrible at drafting. Skill position-wise, he's drafted Rob Gronkowski. And that's like the only all-pro or Pro Bowl offensive playmaker he's drafted. He's gotten like Julian Edelman on the cheap. He got Wes Welker a long time ago.
He's good at getting the most out of his players, but at times he maybe doesn't see the all-pro level players like the DK Metcalfs of the world. You know what I'm saying?
And it's like, all right, we're fine with what we have.
And then...
No, sometimes you need to out-talent the other team. That's what you need to do. Especially when you don't have Tom Brady anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Always about out-coaching. You got to have talent too. And especially in the AFC East, where the AFC East, the first time in a long time, is going to be competitive. You have the Bills, who just went to the AFC Championship game. The Dolphins, who just won 10 games. The Jets appear to be trending upwards, yet they're probably going to take a year or two before they're in serious contention. And the Patriots, I mean, with Bill Belichick at the helm, I still expect them to win half their games at least, just because of good coaching, but they don't have the talent to make the playoffs. And when you're Bill Belichick, and that's what you're used to, you got to figure out a way to make the playoffs. And I think I would not be surprised if they win like 6-7 games next year and Bill decides, I'm done, and hands it over to Josh McDaniels there, which I'd be fine with because I'm not a big fan of Josh McDaniels. I don't think he'll be that good as head coach in his second time. But the Patriots need a lot of offensive help. And I'm not sure if trading for a quarterback, unless it's Jimmy G, because you could probably get him cheaper, or drafting a quarterback is the right way to go. You have to, because you have so many other holes where the quarterback isn't going to fix every issue.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll see what Bill Belichick can do. I do believe the Patriots will make a smart decision. I do believe they will be improved next year because actually their defense is not all that bad. It's still a decent unit. So if you just add maybe another wide receiver or two and just get a little more explosive, I can see them winning 9 to 10 games just off of coaching and good defense alone. And if they get a couple more explosive weapons and just score a couple more points, and Cam Newton actually knows the system better and is more comfortable in that offense in his second year, I could see the Patriots maybe being a playoff team this upcoming year. But we'll see. Definitely a lot of questions in New England.
Adam Schefter, I think, said that there could be potentially 18 quarterback changes, and he'd take the over. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm excited for it because as a Jets fan, that's all I ever have to look forward to is the offseason.
Gotcha. Well, Caleb, that's pretty much all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining the show, talking some New York Jets football. You're a Jets fan, obviously. We talked about the AFC East, You're obviously, like I said, a Jets fan. You go to my college, the University of Toledo. We at times do sports radio together. Once a week, if you can ever get back to doing that. You're busy these days,
Dude, I'd love to.
Yeah,
I've just been so busy, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll put your social media accounts in the description if anyone wants to follow you on social media and whatnot. Thank you for joining the show, man.
Thank you for having me. Have a good one.
No doubt. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juice Alert Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big-time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juice Alert Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.